Bev is here. We don't see the video, but do you hear us? Well,
We have to go back to a previous screen that said sign up.
no. No, it shows you being there. Oh, it's just showing.
There's people there.
I don't see why it should be showing you.
Well, Gary should be there. She just said, oh, here's Terry.
Betsy, Bev is here. Do you hear us? We aren't hearing you.
I've just activated my my
Right.
microphone.
Hear
So I'm going to bring the meeting to order. We are missing two members today, Carter but Bev is fortunately with us off-site. So there is a quorum present, and I would just ask, starting with Terry, for you to check in.
Very present.
And Terry, can you move your mic? I was informed that if we move our mics super close and turn them off and on when we're using them, that it's very helpful for those cameras.
Terry Lee present. Oh, Yuri is present.
Nona
We're going to
And-
mute.
and Betsy Morgan Taylor present. So from there, we move to oral communications. Do you have any oral communications amongst the committee members or those in attendance online? Not hearing any, not seeing any hands raised. I will myself make one oral communication. I wanted to acknowledge with gratitude the tremendous help of our town clerks, that those being Christine Boland and Elizabeth Martelli. Not only were they very helpful with the schoolhouse audio visual setup, but also in providing records. I have recently come, as in yesterday, received the resolution of the town council providing a conservation easement on what was the Goodstein Springdown open space parcels. So we now have in our possession the conservation easement. I wanted to take a moment to reassure those of us who treasure our open space that the restrictions on the use of the property are sound. And in particular, I will read the sentence: during the term of this agreement and the conservation easements granted herein, The easement areas shall not be used for any purpose other than to preserve the natural vegetation, scenic and open space condition of the easement areas. It goes on later to specify that there would be no planting of vegetation other than native vegetation, nor any cutting of vegetation except as required for fire prevention, thinning, and elimination of disease growth. So there's more to it than that, but we're in good shape. This is a part of, I think, what we look forward to continuing to do, which is flesh out our documentation, grant deeds and otherwise on all of our open space parcels. And towards that, we are now, with the help of, again, the town clerks, seeking the original 1970s Dorothy Ford grant deed. So that's my oral communications. And with that, unless there are any others, I will ask for any amendment to the minutes.
I can't seem to get this on my AirPods.
Oh, hi, Karen. Karen, we can hear you if you meant to say that for all of us.
Hello, and I did not. Sorry about that.
Karen, do you want to mute yourself? Maybe you did. Okay. Then turning towards amendments to the minutes, I have not seen a hand raised. And so if there be no amendment to the minutes, with great thanks to Nona for creating them, I ask for a motion to approve. Thank you. First and seconded, all in favor? Aye. Okay, so approved. Next item on the agenda is the new business. It's amazing how quickly almost a year can go by. As of March 7th, I will have served as chair for a full year. So I wanted, because it's January, I wanted to, aim our thinking in that direction. I don't think we need to take it up at this meeting, but we certainly could. I want to leave that up to the full committee. We can take it up at our February or March meeting, but this gives you time to think about our future and leadership.
Bitsy, I would add to that, it's very customary for the chair to serve at least 2 years.
It is?
Oh, yeah. We've all done that. So be ready.
But it's a brother. Oh, no. I wholly support that. No. Thank you very much. I'll give you a month or two to think it over. But thank you for your moral show of support. I take that with great gratitude. You're a wonderful committee and I'm loyal to you too. So let's take that up again next month to be sure. And with that, unless there be any further discussion, I'm going to suggest that we move on to the heart of tonight's business. And to review for those listening in, the Open Space Fund uses that we have quite well discussed over the course of the last year and previously. This is a legally restricted fund by virtue of the 5 ballot measures directing the 2% user utility fund toward open space purposes. Those open space purposes include foremost acquisition and conservation easements. We have, through a fair amount of effort and discussion on this committee over many years, affirmed the importance of capital expenditures to bring parcels in a one-time investment parcels up to a certain level. And since then, last year, Nona and Gary, as 2 members of the subcommittee on maintenance put together a number of recommendations. I included the letter that they wrote and submitted to town council that we approved at our November meeting. So we have outlined appropriate maintenance expenses. If it's appropriate to talk about those again, let's do that now. The larger question on the table is, are we missing any categories here? I will take that quiet as I think it's complete. So where that brings us then to is this particular moment in time. For the first time since I moved to Portola Valley, I've been hearing a real interest amongst town people, and this is kind of rippled through various committees and the town residents, that are you looking, how, are you looking, what are you looking at? Can we not acquire some open space land? So times change, and I think that for a long time, we might have been looking, but not actively looking. And that brings us to the confluence of this moment of seeking affordable housing and alternative sites to Dorothy Ford Park. I know that we would all, I doubt there's a single resident in Portola Valley that wouldn't like to save Dorothy Ford Park if we could find a viable alternative. The timing may or may not work out on that. We can't count on it working out. And so far, in terms of identifying an alternative site that will take all 50 units, I don't know that we've found one. That's up to the ad hoc committee, the ad hoc committee on affordable housing to say. I know they're trying very hard. They have identified a number of very interesting parcels, and the look and you shall find theory of life has surfaced some conceivable complementarity between open space and housing. So with that kind of framing, because we are sitting on a substantial open space fund, and to the degree that we could bring that open space fund forward and achieve two objectives. I mean, we primarily are here for open space, but if in being here for open space, we were also able to liberate more possibilities for affordable housing, how great would that be? So with that spirit in mind, I want to turn this over to Nona, who is one of the 6-7 members of the ad hoc committee, to share what she has before we open it up to the committee for discussion.
The ad hoc committee has looked at several sites that look promising. None of them looks perfect at this point, but I think it's worth discussing whether or not there are any sort of permutations that address what Betsy has identified as a possible sort of win-win of protecting Dorothy Ford Park and open space, and at the same time meeting our required housing. One of the sites that we've looked at, that I've looked at in particular, is in the agenda packet. And that is a site, a residential property across from Dorothy Ford Park, whose owner has volunteered the property several times in public meetings. And everything that we'll discuss today from the ad hoc committee will have already been discussed in public meetings. And that site has a number of advantages. One, that it's not in Dorothy Ford Park open space, but also that it is not subject to creek setbacks and not at risk of erosion and flooding from the creek. The primary disadvantage of that parcel, which is 3350 Alpine Road, is that it's part of Westridge. And it has several neighbors. And so even though the housing could be concentrated at the bottom of the slope and right along Alpine Road without actually going into the scenic corridor setback even, which would make it less visible from properties uphill, there's still going to be opposition, we're certain. So I'm kind of assuming that people have heard about that or have seen it in the agenda packet, and we'd be happy to discuss some of the ideas related to that. But there is also a second property that has potential, I guess, in the sense of merging the interests of open space and also affordable housing. And that particular one has to do with the Fogarty properties. And so what I think maybe is the simplest thing to do here is actually to just show you what the committee has looked at. And I'll do that by sharing my screen and also sharing a couple of handouts here. Yeah, jump in anytime, anyone.
I just wanted to mention as regards parcels within Westridge or anything having to do with, it's come to, I included in our agenda package the new housing laws, and 721, I did do a Google search to see if Assembly Bill 721, which aims to shoot a hole through the CCNRs, the covenants and conditions and restrictions, there is no case precedent yet. 721 has not yet been used, at least as far as it has, as I could find online. So if anyone listening can jump in if they think otherwise, but I did a pretty good search yesterday and could not find one. So I think it's good that we know that this would be new territory and for all of us. So we continue now that we're moving away from that discussion towards Fogarty.
Yeah, well, I'll just add on 3350 Alpine that the reason that's relevant is that a couple of the options for that parcel, one would be to do a lot split and have sort of a conserved area at the rear of the property or preserve the residence that's already there. And then the remainder would have to be zoned at 20 units per acre. Both of those, both a lot split and a rezoning, would conflict with the CCNRs for Westridge. So that's why it's a problem. So we can come back to that and maybe discuss it more, but maybe I'll turn now to Fogarty, introduce that whole idea, and then, rather than belabor one or the other. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Let me just do one more thing here. If that works. Okay. All right. So what this, whoops. Sorry. Advanced. Okay. Just going, this is, the display is not quite keeping up with my computer here. So just be patient. No, there we go. Okay. This is the image. First image has two panels. One on the left has white parcel boundaries that represent all of the parcels that are part of Fogarty Winery. The road on, let's see if I can show this with my arrow. The road at the southern end, that's Skyline Boulevard. Fogarty, the parcels here were looked at during the last housing element. And so it was considered in terms of all of the filters that were used for assessing sites to see whether or not they would be suitable for housing. And at that time, it didn't go really any further because there were no plans by the Fogarty family to change the status of their property. That may be changing now. Mary Hufty, interim planning director, Terrence Grindall, and I met with the Fogartys, and there is interest on their part in transitioning the property. It's a beautiful property. It's huge, 215 acres here, plus additional parcels that are to the northeast of the polygons that you see here and are part of the family holdings. Everything that you see to the northwest of these parcels is part of Windy Hill. And so there's actually Razorback Ridge Trail through there. The context for this is shown at the right, where you can see the Fogarty parcels superimposed on a map of MROSD lands, and how it's kind of amazingly and beautifully positioned to connect trails on the two sides of Skyline and really sort of complete a whole sequence of open space. Where this comes to our committee really is one parcel in particular, the southwest most parcel along Skyline. So the one that's in the bottom left corner, so the southwest parcel. I'll just highlight it here. So I'm drawing my arrow around it. So that's 0800100020. It's 14 acres and has good frontage on Skyline. And the family, the Fogarty family, is interested in working with the town to help address the need to find an alternative site for Dorothy Ford Park under a range of conditions, but they've been very amenable to meeting with us and talking about things. So the question really before us is there open space interest in that parcel? Is there potential for affordable housing in that parcel? And can one imagine acquiring it for open space while at the same time dedicating part of it to affordable housing? There are a number of possibilities here. I won't go into them all, but that's the general idea. I'll show one more slide just to show you the parcel again at the lower left along Skyline. Do that. Okay, this should change. And just to illustrate what we're talking about here a little bit more closely, this shows that parcel in 1941 and again in 2016 to show how there is an area that is not forested completely. It used to be completely open and now it's partially forested. They're doing a lot of mastication on the property now. Yeah, so I don't have a whole lot more to add about it at this point, except that there's an active discussion going on, and that after meeting with the Fogarty family, Mary Hufty has met with Post and MROSD because basically the family seems to be interested in transitioning the entire winery property in one way or another. And so it seems like a natural thing for Post or MRSD to really engage in. At the same time that the town might want to look closely at one particular parcel. So I'll leave it there, and so we can kind of open up for conversation.
I
And I'll
can
stop
read
sharing.
lips, Terry.
So I heard a lot about this in the conversation with Betsy this morning. So it's not a complete surprise, and I've been thinking about it all day long. The concept of the housing as being maybe agriculture for agricultural workers, because I'm reminded that there's many, many vineyards up there and a number of workers. Do we have any idea on numbers of workers, number of vineyards? Just if we could get some kind of account of who might be interested in living in these places.
So initially, the conversation focused on whether or not the Fogarty Winery itself would want to house workers there. And the answer to that is likely no. On the other hand, there is a need for housing on Skyline. And what Terrence Grindal has suggested is that we consider the possibility of farm worker housing writ large. So workers who would be employed at a number of different places. They wouldn't necessarily have to be in the immediate vicinity is what he suggested. The other possibility that he suggested we look into is migrant farm workers, which apparently the state is putting a premium on finding locations for. So we don't have a lot of information at this point. We looked into it from the standpoint of the Williamson Act at first, thinking that the property was in the Williamson Act. It appears that it is not. That changes the options a little bit. And we're just starting to sort of rethink it from that new framework.
So you also mentioned that you didn't think that the current owners would approve of housing on this property?
So the current owners were, I would say, very sympathetic to the idea of farm worker housing on that parcel. That it would probably involve selling the parcel to the town or to someone else to do it. I didn't get the sense that they're interested in undertaking that themselves. The area that I showed I don't know what the shape is there, but there's a sort of irregular polygon drawn in this that has been cleared in the past. And that's about 2.5 acres. So that's kind of the magic number in terms of thinking about creating 50 units of housing at 20 units per acre. What Terrence has advised us is that HCD is really looking for projects that would have 20 units per acre minimum and would be big enough to actually replace Dorothy Ford Park.
So it's not a hard no from the owners?
It is not a hard no.
Not a
from the
hard no.
owners.
Okay, so there's
They were
some-
interested. I think they're starting to think about how their property should and could transition. They are not interested in seeing big developments there. And I guess they've been approached by developers and don't want to go that route. They want the land to stay as natural as possible, but they're also sympathetic to the idea of farm worker housing.
Okay. Well, I've got to be always reminded that there's no such thing as a crazy idea. So this is not crazy.
I like the way you frame that. I mean, no matter, it's kind of crazy wonderful. It isn't something that I had, in my wildest dreams imagined. And then you start looking at it and there is some synergy. I wanted to first hear from Terry and then wanted to share a couple of things that I looked at today.
Sure. This is public information
The-
before today.
Yes.
So I apologize. I'm sure I'm going to ask a few questions, which maybe you'll entertain that is already publicly known, just not known by me. This property, this site is considered Portola Valley.
It is very much.
Okay.
Portola Valley.
I'm just asking. And I think I heard you say that the family has expressed interest, their own interest in beginning to think about what to do with all of their property in the foreseeable future. And this is just one of the parcels of all of their property.
So the winery, the Thomas Fogarty Winery LLC has 8 parcels. And then the family and trust have other parcels. One of those parcels is up for sale already, the one with the big house on it,
Oh, okay.
But
But there are
also-
8 parcels in the
in the winery.
schematic that you have here, and these are the winery parcels?
Yes, they
Okay.
are.
And the comment about them thinking about their property is specific to the winery parcels or all of their parcels, including the family personal parcels?
I can't answer that for sure, but
Okay.
my sense is that they're thinking about the entire property, but open to conversations
okay.
with various.
One other question is the thought that how important is it that we have to conceive of who the tenants might be? Because we're speculating about farm workers or whatnot. How important is that?
Again, I'm not an expert in
Understand.
this. I think in order to be an alternative for Dorothy Ford Park, it has to be very low income.
Very low income.
So that's one requirement.
Right.
The second thing to consider is who might partner with the town to make this happen if the town were to acquire it. So whether there would be grant money or state money or foundation money or whatever it is, that those programs are generally targeted to certain kinds of housing. So the advantage of the location, and we've heard that there is a need for low-income housing on Skyline. There's some negatives about it, some minuses. There's no schools nearby. There's no shopping nearby. It's not on sewer. So there are a lot of things that are drawbacks in terms of both low-income housing and what it costs to develop it. But they may not be deal breakers on this.
And lastly, has there been any conversation or consultation with the prior proposed partners for development at Dorothy Ford Park that they could or would likely not be a potential partner for a site like this?
I'm going to ask you to rephrase that question. Did you say form partner, a developer partner at Dorothy Ford Park? Because we haven't identified one yet.
We as in our committee or the town has
Oh, no,
never?
the town has not yet.
Oh,
the
I thought
people-
they had.
People have reached out to, like Alta Housing, formerly Palo Alto, well, I don't need to remember its old name, its new name is Alta Housing, that do low-income housing. They've become successful enough that they do it much beyond Palo Alto. Former town council member Sarah Wernikoff reached out to them to learn that in her conversation that 50 units was kind of a magic number. That if we fall too much below 50 units to consolidate very affordable housing, that it would not pencil out. That was a learning in a conversation that she had, I think, back in 2022 or early 2023. There, a couple of other council members have reached out and had individual conversations with, theoretical conversations and learned tidbits here and there, but we do not have a partner.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. That's super helpful. I know I've come across Mid-Penn Housing, which has done a lot of work, up and down the peninsula, frankly, including, I think, coast side. And so I was just curious about the testing of what could qualify as potentially desirable from not just a financial, but a development partner. And I had also imagined from my old days as a student at Stanford that I remember having many friends who lived up the hill, not because it was convenient, but because it was affordable to options closer to town. So anyway, different type of potential tenant. And I was just mentally exploring the diversity of potential consumers at this kind of location.
Yeah, what I would love is to have a conversation here about the open space value of a parcel in that place that looks like that. We can't I don't want to go beyond what's already been said publicly in the ad hoc meetings. So, and I think I basically said everything that has, so I don't have really any more to add on that, but
I have
guess the
something.
question is, does this make sense, something like this in the context of the open space fund, which Betsy has sort of laid open as what works?
Well,
And so if it doesn't work as open space, then we can leave it to the ad hoc committee, the town council, and planning commissioners to vet these other decisions. If it works as open space though, that would be a phenomenal opportunity because we can actually help with funding alongside some of the development partners of which we just spoke and other grant money. I did look into it. I printed out a map that I will pass on down and maybe one of you can show it to the audience. But just to show the trail linkages, because some while back I had spoken with Dan and Helen Quinn, this is years back, about their interest in connecting the Bay Area Trail as it comes to an abrupt halt there at the end of Lost Trail. If you walk to Lost Trail, where Lost Trail has a spur up to the skyline, it comes to a halt. And their dream was to, not theirs alone, but shared dream was to create a connection. And so this would make sense from a standpoint of that kind of connection, that it's adjacent to an open space, that town council member is already reaching out to Post and Mid-Penn, the possibilities of participating and collaborating here. I found pretty energizing that it was, we have been thinking that I will admit, whether you have or not, but I've been thinking pretty much central Portola Valley or Portola Valley on the valley floor. And yet, this idea, particularly the appeal of agricultural workers and how difficult is some of their housing and the draw that this would be, I found pretty exciting.
As a point of clarification, is would the parcel have to be rezoned? Or is the zoning of that parcel, does it already permit some kind of residential family housing?
Yeah.
It does?
It would have to be
Oh, it
rezoned
have to be.
likely. Yeah.
I think no matter where we would do this,
Yeah.
it would need to be rezoned.
When we first started looking into it and thought that it was part of the Williamson Act, it would not have needed to be rezoned, as I understand it, because that's a compatible use with the with Williamson contracts.
And yet it's good that it's not in a Williamson contract because it opens up the possibilities of bringing in workers from offsite, ag workers from offsite, whereas Williamson Act would have tied it to their personal needs.
Yeah, I mean, it really is remarkable on the trails because you have Razorback Ridge that comes up to Skyline. On the other side of the road, there's, Russian Ridge and the Ridge Trail is there. And then you keep going and there's Pete's Trail and Clouds Rest and they all end up at Skyline. So.
I guess notwithstanding the rezoning requirement, which is totally understandable, by the way. From my recollection of some of the earlier conversations about Dorothy Ford Park, that site, I remember discussions, not recommendations or conclusions, but discussions about the appetite for using open space funds to help develop a housing situation, like, for example, with underground parking, to minimize the impact on that site and preserve actually as much open space as possible. And I'm not saying that there was any recommendation or excitement about that, but what I recall about that ideation was whether or not we felt that open space funds could be used to protect existing open space by supporting less impactful housing, qualifying housing. And so taking that ideation and applying it to a much larger site like this, where one might be able to take 2.5 acres of a 14-acre site, much larger than Dorothy Ford Park, but in theory with enough space to develop a meaningful to a partner project with 50 units, for example, on 2.5 acres of it, and still preserve the majority of that site, including adjacencies to other open space. I personally think it's interesting to at least be open to that kind of solution finding to accomplish our overall objective of preserving and protecting open space broadly. So I'm trying to draw an analogy between from something which, by the way, again, I'm acknowledging no one agreed was a good idea, but was an idea with the spirit of protecting open space, by the way, and taking that idea and considering it on a different site with the same rationale, but maybe more ability to accomplish that rationale by, basically protecting even more. I mean, protecting 12.5 acres or 11.5 acres instead of who knows what fraction of an acre we could protect it.
And when you talk about protection, just as I'm understanding you, do you mean this is an idea that I've had, so I was maybe hearing it in your answer, but just checking. If we were not successful in identifying a parcel that could accept 50 units, but we did find one that could accept 15, a dozen, it would diminish the impact on Dorothy Ford nonetheless. It could, and so we could start to play around with, because I think one thing before we go back to I do want to continue to talk a little bit about the open space benefits. On Dorothy Ford, we did go through, thanks to Nona's LiDAR mapping, an involved calculation. So we realized that the 2.48 acres that are in our housing element really amount to 1.1 acre developable land. And to put 50 units on 1.1 acre of developable land will not at all be a rural look. It is not going to be less than 4 stories if we limit it to if it's 50 units on that area. I think it will be really, really challenging to get it down to 3. In case the idea of being able to bring some of that, if not all of that housing somewhere else to an alternate site would serve open space purposes. If we could bring even more, we could save the oak trees. That's a bigger stretch since they sit right there in the middle. But yes, was that what you were pointing towards? Because if not, will you
No,
the
I guess I'll try and
descriptive-
restate what I was trying to say.
Thank you.
I wasn't trying to reinforce the analysis we'd done before about Dorothy Ford Park and the practicality or desirability or efficiency or effectiveness of taking that parcel and converting it to an unsatisfactory number of affordable housing units. I still feel that way. It's unsatisfactory, and even worse, it's taking away a site and trees that you cannot replace. That's not what I'm debating. I'm just reflecting that when we were, without getting into the specific calculations, when we were ideating about ways to try and protect those trees and protect as much of that space as possible while still accommodating some need or perceived need or desire to chip away at the affordable housing requirements we're trying to chip away at, that we came up with this idea, or we wondered if it was appropriate to take open space funds and actually help develop affordable housing, which doesn't sound right, except if you're really creative about what you're doing, help develop affordable housing less impactfully on open space and therefore indirectly preserving open space. And I remember frustration about, wait a second, we already own this open space. Why would we use more money on open space we already own to like protect it? But these are desperate times, and desperate measures sometimes are required. And, you know, I felt like we were asking ourselves, even though we already own this open space, people are telling us that's nice, but we may take it away from you. And I think some of us were just wondering, would we be willing to, and is there a way to double down and say, oh, we're going to protect this open space by giving up a little bit, as little of it as possible, to this need. And I was just trying to apply that principle, even though I was not suggesting anyone agreed or thought it was a great or perfect idea for that site, to a much larger site where the notion of developing some affordable housing does not, at least at first glance, feel horribly in conflict with protecting and preserving open space as well. And by the way, I have no idea how much 14-acre parcel, this 14-acre parcel will go for. I don't want to acknowledge that too. I must also say, when you said, oh my goodness, we might be able to contribute to connecting the ridge trail in this area, my antenna went up and said, oh my God, I think that's brilliant. Because I'm up here a lot and I know exactly what that concept would represent here. And I think that's goodness. So anyway, I wasn't trying to be, certainly was not trying to give up Dorothy Park. And it wasn't necessarily because I'm not informed about the details of this particular site, but at least at a high level and at a conceptual level, I was just commenting, oh, this sounds like it could be a better version of what some of us desperate thinkers were thinking about at Dorothy Ford, that felt like it could be a better site of the same idea.
Yeah.
Not saying that that idea was anyone agreed with, but I'm just,
Beautifully said. I
Is
think
that-
Nona has something.
I mean, as I recall those conversations, we actually talked about whether we could buy Dorothy Ford Park again and then use that money for, have the town use that money for an alternative housing site. And so this really is that that idea just expanded to another location. Maybe. I mean, maybe it's crazy, but maybe nothing is crazy.
Please do.
I got what you were saying. And I wanted to give Gary a chance. Do you have a response to Terry's?
Well, that
comments.
brings up a couple of questions. I heard, I think earlier, Nona, you said that builders are really not for very low cost housing. Builders are not interested in anything less than something like 50 units. Is that, yeah?
I said that's a data point that, it's not in the Bible or the equivalent. We can check that out vis-a-vis a number of developers in the course of the time ahead. And I have no doubt that there will be some, but that was a rule of thumb that was provided a couple of years ago.
So if we had 5 parcels and did 15 units, that would be not easily done from a financial standpoint, is that?
It's the financing, and I think I heard Terry didn't want to get into the nitty-gritty specifics because that ties you up in knots quickly. But as we start to think creatively about how we can contribute positively to these twin goals, I think we are all pretty familiar with, long before Dorothy Ford was tapped to be the prime site for 50 affordable units. We were talking about conservation easements. I remember Craig Hughes came to this committee and advocated for that we look at conservation easements. So that's, I just been floating around out there for a while. The thought of using it on Dorothy Ford, valuing Dorothy Ford and allowing the Open Space Committee to essentially place a durable conservation easement on it is something that, as I hear Terry speaking, is a marvelous vehicle for doing what you're thinking about. And then that would imply that we had satisfied HCD with an alternate site. So that's where the complementarity with the ad hoc committee comes in. If this site, if we were to do a study, which means much larger than, probably larger than the town of Portola Valley, were to do a study about migrant farm workers or ag workers in general, and their locus, how far they're traveling from wherever to get to work on top of Skyline now. And we might come up with some compelling reasons to move forward on this. We might not. As housing.
All of imagination goes to maybe Stanford becomes a partner. Just hear me out. And could I imagine a Marguerite shuttle going from campus to Stanford graduate housing or young family housing up here? I don't know. Does Stanford have other alternative sites? Absolutely, understandably. I get that. But if we were to open the aperture of possibilities, and by the way, I've also worked, now that I think about it, not just with Midpen, but Bridge. Bridge has a housing development right next door to us at one of my sites in San Mateo. A beautiful, beautiful location. And by the way, minimum, I think 80 units. So I get the idea of, need to have a minimum scale to make economic sense for financial and other partners. But I must admit that these are just wonders. But I'm a little bit in the wonder business, and honestly, and stranger things have happened. So anyway, that was, for example, a thought of, are there other types of tenants that might qualify as low income or very low income that could be good tenants, responsible tenants, useful tenants to the community. And I was one of those people a few decades ago. I lived up the hill, not this far up the hill in Woodside. And I was a graduate student.
I don't think any of us are going to forget that you just said, I'm in the wonder business.
I am.
Makes you a great brainstormer.
I have another question for Norm.
Can you speak into the mic just? so
Yeah,
everyone
is
can-
the committee looking at sites for 50 units, or are they thinking also about 15 here, 10 there? Are they looking at both those kinds of numbers of units?
The committee is looking at everything conceivable at this point, and that does involve sites with fewer and sites with as many as 50. What we've been advised is that what HCD really needs to see is zoning at 20 to 23 units per acre in order to be convinced that it will be very low income housing. So it's the zoning itself that is really important. And whether you do that on 1 acre and get 20 or 23, or do it on 2.5 acres and get 50 or so, that might be a development financing question. But HCD needs to see us fully replace what's at Dorothy Ford Park, and it needs to be at 20 units per acre. That's my understanding. But this is getting back into
Yeah.
housing, and we're really here about,
We're here
are there conservation and open space ideas to discuss regarding.
Just following up on that, 20 units per acre. But if you had 1 acre with 20 units on it, that works. But you'd have to do that 5 times to get to 50. Is that kind of how your committee thinks?
I mean, you'd have to do it 2.5 times if you had 20 units on 1 acre, and you need to get to 50, but a lot of ideas are on the table in the ad hoc site evaluation committee. I would really encourage people to go to those committee meetings, because I can't represent everyone's ideas at this point. And, the ideas are evolving They're changing with every meeting and we're meeting every 2 weeks. So a lot is in flux.
Terry,
And we're
after
not there
you,
yet.
Terry, I can see is poised to make a contribution, and then I would take a question from the audience.
No, I guess the only other thing I wanted to point out, because I feel like Betsy and Nona both just reminded us that we're the open space committee, so we should not lose sight of the fact that we focus on open space. And I also feel like over the years that at least I've been involved, struggled might be too strong of a word, but we have aspired to find interesting, credible sites to invest our funds in. And, we engaged in various levels of inquiry to neighbors and, all kinds of stuff and struggled. And so at some level, part of asking, oh, is this Portola Valley? And, asking about the owner's intent and stuff is also recognizing, forgetting about affordable housing for a second, is like, oh, that's actually Portola Valley. It's adjacent to a great mid-Penn site that I'm personally very familiar with and enjoy. And maybe it's a good target for our funds, even aside from affordable housing.
I love the way you think. I hear you.
And I'm also intrigued, by the way, with the idea that it might be connected to a much larger set of parcels and a potential owner who's expressed interest, maybe not tomorrow, but over time, of selling, contributing, who knows what. And that we also probably imagine that places like Post or Mid-Penn, the trust, prefer to focus on larger opportunities because of the leverage of the investment of their assets and time relative to those larger opportunities versus smaller opportunities. And so are investing potentially alongside a parcel and a partner that could do interesting things with that focus or that site or prospective site also to me sounds appealing versus finding a residential lot, in the middle of some development and trying to make that an interesting standalone open space parcel, but having neighbors and, all commercial or whatever other stuff, and facing the threat of what's happening at Dorothy Ford Park right now, right? And so there's something interesting about this notion that this could be interesting to other fans and supporters of open space as well.
What I love about, if I could, before I call on the member of the public who's been patiently waiting, what I appreciate about what you've just opened up, Terry, is it would give the town real flexibility to be able to proceed with the members of the family, because it wouldn't be locked around housing. The housing will be obviously complex, but if we were to have interest one way or the other, it might really liberate things for all of us, and demonstrate to HCD simultaneously that we were very serious. With that, this would probably be the good moment to call on Christy Corley. Do you want to unmute yourself? Please do.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to compliment Nona for her research in protecting Dorothy Ford Park in any way possible, because I always envisioned a wonderful park under those trees, and really measuring out what can really be done, the 55 feet from the Los Trancos. I really appreciated your research on all this. And I still would ideally envision families under those trees enjoying the beauty of that parcel as you drive into Portola Valley. So thank you for your work on that. And this sounds like a great opportunity. I will share that when we first came to Portola Valley, we were looking up at the skyline and we were looking in Half Moon Bay. So, oops. And that was a way to get in, and we ended up on Woodside Highlands area, which was a way to get into Portola Valley. So as Terry said, there's a whole community up there with volunteer firefighters, with the art show that goes on once a year. The parents do drive out to 92 and down 280 to some of the high schools, and they're willing to do that for the beauty. So I see it as a way to keep families together in Portola Valley, knowing that one person is already, one of my son's friends has bought a house up there and starting a family and still close to the parents. So I do see this as a good extension of our, you know, community. So I would think that others would be interested in this parcel, and I would encourage you to look at purchasing it, not in a look at it, how do I say this? Seriously and quickly, I guess. Because I think some of the other people might be interested. Their values are slightly different from a housing value. So I'll leave it at that. But thank you for your work and your time on this.
Thank you, Christy. And Karen Askey, I see your hand up.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. So I'm on the ad hoc site evaluation committee with Nona, and I want to first of all say that she did a fabulous job presenting where we are and what we are considering. So thank you, Nona. You're a pleasure to work with. And I also want to thank all of you. Terry, you said it, but for you guys are in the wonder business right now. And you in open space are keeping an open mind. And we need that very much. We need to be thinking creatively. And I know that our residents appreciate all your support and ideas. And somebody said this earlier, I think it was Gary, no idea is a crazy idea. I mean, we need to look at everything. And we are in the exploration phase. We do have a meeting next Tuesday, the 26th at 5:30. We appreciate you coming to the meeting and speaking publicly or sharing ideas because we want to do this together as residents. So that's where we stand. And I just want to let you know how much I personally, and I know our ad hoc committee appreciates your support of what we're trying to do here. Thank you.
And we very much appreciate your support because it really has been because of the ad hoc committee's identification of so many possibilities that this one came to our attention. So it's already been win-win. I want to join both Christy and you, Karen, in major appreciation for Nona's tremendous capabilities and gifts to our committee and community writ large. Here, here.
Bravo.
Yes, big bravo. And as to wonder, I'm reading a completely wonderful book that I recommend to all of you. It's written by Elif Shafak. She's a Turkish woman living in author living in London for more years than in Turkey and considers herself and probably is dual citizen. The book is called There Are Rivers in the Sky, and she talks about having to imagine things into reality, that without imagination, we can't make anything real. And it reminds me very much of tonight's conversation. So thank you, Karen, for stimulating that thought. Are there any other comments either from our esteemed member Bev Lipman? We're so appreciating your being with us from the spot that you can be, or other members of the community online. Not Terry, no, we good?
I guess I just want to make a shout out for Mary Hufty though as well, because she is the person who initiated the contact with the Fogarty family, which launched a really interesting conversation. And as probably everyone knows, completing the Ridge Trail is something that she has been a lifelong fan of, I think. So I think she's played a
Here,
huge role in the
here.
ad hoc
Thank
committee.
you, Mary and Judith, our liaison, who also is on the subcommittee, but Mary leading this committee before Karen took over as chair. Thank you, Karen. So with that, I guess that might bring us to the end of the agenda. Before I ask for a motion to adjourn, are there any issues on any of your minds that you would like to bring up now for a future meeting? And do you have a sense? Let me first, I was going to ask you about committee dates. We would normally meet the first Thursday in February and or March. It was, I think timing is very hard to anticipate. Things are fast moving right now. What I would propose, if you could, check your calendars and book both dates. If we can let one of them go, we will. But if things just are on a low simmer, we will let one of them go. But if they are bubbling along at the rate that they have been, we may need them both.
What are the?
Quizzical look. First Thursday of February, first Thursday of March would be was it the 6th? Yeah, looks like it. Thursday, the 6th of February. Thursday, the 6th of March. Possible? Great.
Why don't you be the judge of whether we should meet as early as February?
I shall do.
Yeah,
I shall
okay.
do. Thank you for holding them just in case.
Yeah,
And
okay.
it looks like Rita has her hand up. Rita.
Oh, thank you so much for taking my comment. Talking about different ways to get money and to do different things. You know, I've been upset from the beginning of all this clarification or re-clarification of Dorothy Ford Park. Since I've moved into this town, the different discussions I find quite disturbing. But there's money that is received for Dorothy Ford Park every month for rent. And I wanted, you know, since we don't see the receivables on the warrant list, I just want to make this group aware of it. And, you know, to make sure that we keep track when your group is being asked to fund cleaning up Dorothy Ford Park or mowing or something. There is rent money that the town is receiving.
Oh, you're talking about the parcel that is
Correct. Correct.
towards Ladera.
Correct. And they may not.
Is it your understanding that that's part of the 7.6 acres?
Yes, it's and Ladera
It
Oaks
does go
is
to the property. It does go to the town boundary.
Oh, thank you, Rita, for reminding me.
right. And
Oh,
I
fascinating.
remember when that contract got redone,
Mhm.
Jeremy was our town manager, and he signed it for just up under like $4,999 because that's all he could sign
No,
that type of
well,
contract for.
excuse me.
So
I hear your point. I think that the issue with that parcel, as with all parcels in town, is the, oh, what is it called? Does anyone remember that? There's a housing law where we cannot let go of town-owned
Surplus land.
Surplus land act. Thank you, Nona. The
Right,
surplus
right.
land act prevents us from selling it, so you can.
Not for selling it, but for that $5,000, not for selling it at all. But that rent that is being received for that, when people are asking the Open Space Committee for money, let's not forget that $5,000, which I'm not sure if
Thank
it's monthly or yearly.
Why, well, thank you for raising it. I'm always happy to put more money in the bank.
And thank you for all that you guys are doing. I'm so proud.
Thank you, Rita. And it doesn't look like we have any other hands in the air. This is going to be a last call. And with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Gary. Second, Terry, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming.